Hello and welcome to what would be WayTooBroad if there was an episode this week. I'm Hannah, one of your hosts, here to let you know a few things. First of all, there's no episode this week because our esteemed third co-host and my baby brother Ben had to have an emergency root canal on the night that we were supposed to record. So he was in no state to be really talking at all. So we thought we'd take this week off. He's doing much better now. Please feel free to send him lots of, good wishes. But he's really, I've never had a root canal, but apparently you can go from like in so much pain to like no pain at all in the course of a day, which is great. So good for Ben. Also, secondly, wanted to let you guys know that next week there will also not be an episode and probably nothing in the feed about it. We'll just be taking the whole week off because Erin and I and a few of our friends and Ian, producer Ian, are all going to Savannah. And Erin and I are the only ones that edit the podcast. Ben doesn't. He's dead weight. He's causing us to not have an episode this week. He's basically causing us to not have an episode next week, But no, seriously, like we'll be away most of the week. So we'll be back in 2 weeks from today on March 20th to tell you all about our adventures in Savannah. And I already have a couple of other exciting surprises up my sleeve for that episode. So please join us for that. And then also I thought as a little treat, since, we have this time together, just you guys and me, that we could do maybe a few chapters of Ella Enchanted for those who have been listening to that. I hope there are some of you. I think I'm going to try to do 3 chapters. So this is now post-show book club, but without the show. With me, Hannah, your host of Post-Show Book Club. When we left off, Ella and her very annoying evil stepsisters had just arrived at their finishing school after a close encounter with some ogres on the way there, and I believe Ella had not eaten in a few days because of her stepsister Hattie, and she had met a new friend, and I think I had teased that I feel like that friendship, in the context of like a mini series, not in the context of this book necessarily. I don't think it's like in the text, but I feel like in the context of a mini series, it could easily be like a sort of sapphic romantic connection. So let's get into it. We're on chapter 10. A maid showed me to a corridor lined with doors. Each one was painted a different pastel color and had a card affixed to it announcing the name of the room. We passed the lime room, the daisy room, and the opal room, and stopped before the lavender room. The maid opened the door. For a moment, I forgot my hunger. I was in a cloud of light purple. Some of the purples blushed faintly pink, others were tinted pale blue, but there was no other color. The curtains were streamers, undulating from the breeze made by the door closing behind me. Beneath my feet was a hooked rug in the design of a huge violet. In a corner stood a clay chamber pot disguised as decorative cabbage. I always forget what a chamber pot is, and I wish I could keep forgetting. The 5 beds were swathed in a gauzy fabric. The 5 bureaus were painted with wavy stripes of pale and paler lavender. I wanted to throw myself on a bed and cry about being so hungry and about everything else, but those were not beds onto which one could throw oneself. A purple chair was placed next to one of the 2 windows. I sank into it. If I didn't succumb to starvation, I would be here for a long time, with hateful mistresses and with Hattie ordering me about. I stared out the window at Madame Edith's garden until exhaustion and hunger produced a kind of stupor in me. In a while, I slept. Here, Ella, you can eat this. An urgent whisper pushed its way into my dream, and about roasted pheasant stuffed with chestnuts. Someone shook my shoulder. Wake up, Ella, wake up. An order. I was awake. AREIDA thrust a roll into my hands. It's all I could get. Eat it before the others come in. In 2 swallows, I ate the soft white roll, more air than sustenance, but more sustenance than I'd had in days. Thank you. Do you sleep here too? She nodded. Where? The door opened and 3 maidens entered. Look, queer ducks flock together, The speaker was the tallest pupil in the school. She pronounced her L's as Y's, mocking AREIDA's accent. Eshete ifebensi asuru edans evtame orgento? I asked AREIDA. Is this how they behave at finishing school? Otemso ifebensi ashura ipiri. Sometimes they are much worse. Are you from Eortha too? The tall maiden asked me. No, but AREIDA is teaching me the beautiful Eorthan language. And Eorthan, you are an Ibwi Unju. It only meant tall girl. I didn't know any insults in Eorthan. However, AREIDA was laughing, which made it seem the worst of epithets. I laughed too. AREIDA collapsed on top of me. And together we shook the purple chair. Madam Edith, the headmistress, bustled in. Young ladies, what do I see? AREIDA leapt up, but I remained seated. I couldn't stop laughing. My chairs are not made to take such abuse, and young ladies do not sit two to a seat. Do you hear me? Ella, stop your unseemly laughter. I stopped mid-giggle. That's better. Since it's your first day here, I shall excuse your behavior and trust that it will not happen tomorrow. Madam Edith turned to the others. Into your night dresses, young ladies. The shores of sleep are approaching. Oh my God. AREIDA and I exchanged glances. It was very cheering to have a friend. Everyone else reached the shores of sleep, but I remained oceans away. I had been given a nightdress so covered with bows and frills that I couldn't lie flat comfortably. I slipped out of bed and opened my carpet bag. If I couldn't sleep, I could read. Madam Edith thought fear of the dark was to be expected in young ladies, so a lamp was left burning. My book opened to a letter from Mandy. Dear Ella, this morning I baked scones. Bertha and Nathan and I will eat them for a snack before we go to bed, but I baked 2 extra. We'll have to divide yours and eat them too. I promised myself I wouldn't trouble you by saying how much I miss you, and see how I start. The parrot man, name of Simon, came here today with one of his birds to give you. It speaks Gnomic and Elfian. He said it wasn't fine enough for the menagerie, but you might like it. He told me what to feed it. I never thought I'd be cooked to a parrot. I wish it would stop talking once in a while. I wonder if I have a recipe for parrot stew. Don't worry, sweet. I would never cook your present. Yesterday, you had a grander visitor and received a bigger gift than a bird. The prince himself came to see you, leading a centaur cult. When I told him you were away from home, he wanted to know where you'd gone and when you'd be back. And when he heard you were at finishing school, he was indignant. He demanded to know why you needed to be finished, since there was nothing wrong with you to start with. I couldn't answer him because I'd like to ask that father of yours the same question. I did tell him we had nowhere to keep a growing centaur. He's a little beauty, but what can I do with him? Your prince said he'd raise him for you. He asked me to tell you the colt's name, Apple. That made me remember my manners, and I gave him his name to eat before he left with the prince. Speaking of leaving, your father departed the same day you did. Said he was off to the Greenies, which I gather was his disrespectful name for the elves. Said not to expect him back anytime soon. I wish you were coming home soon. Bertha and Nathan send their love, and I send mine by the bushel, by the barrel, by the ton. From your old cook, Mandy. P.S. Drink your tonic. I don't know if that's a repeated phrase in the book or not, by the bushel, by the barrel, by the ton. I'm really not sure. You know, I've read this book a lot of times, and there are like certain lines in it that like trigger my crying reflex, and that's one of them. I just like started to tear up. It's very sweet. I closed the book and whispered to its spine, "Don't erase the letter, please." Then I drank my tonic. A centaur cult, a little beauty. If only I could see him and pet him and let him know me. The tears that hadn't come in the afternoon came now. Mandy would be desperate if she knew I hadn't eaten in 3 days, and if she knew I was under the thumb of a monster like Hattie. I would say I'm sorry about the rustling noises. I'm not sorry, but I did forget to warn you that this isn't like an audiobook. It's like a bedtime story. So, sorry, not sorry for the rustling noises. I do apologize if they do bother you. The next morning, Music Mistress led us in song and singled out my off-key voice. Ella does not notice that there is more than one note, she told everyone. Come here, child, sing this. She played a note on the harpsichord. I wouldn't be able to. I could never carry a tune. What would happen when I couldn't obey? I sang the wrong note. Music Mistress frowned. Higher, or we shall send you to a different school to sing with the young gentlemen. She depressed the key again. My next attempt was much too high. One lass covered her ears. I wished her an earache. Music Mistress played again. My temples throbbed. I sang. A little lower. I hit the note. She played another. I sang it. She played a scale. I sang every note. I beamed. I'd always wished I could sing. I sang the scale again, louder. Perfect. That's enough, young lady. You must sing when I tell you to, and not otherwise. An hour later, dancing mistress told me to step lightly. My partner was Julia, the tall maiden who had teased AREIDA the night before. I pressed on her arms, using her to support my weight so I could step lightly. "Stop that!" She pulled away. I fell. I heard giggles. Dancing mistress took Julia's place. I couldn't lean on her. I pretended my feet were balloons. I pretended the floor would crack if I didn't move lightly. We stepped. We glided. We sprang forward, jumped back. I wasn't graceful, but I didn't shake the ground. My gown was soaked with perspiration. That's better. At lunch, manners mistress said, "Don't rap your knuckles on the table, Ella. The king would be ashamed of you." She frequently invoked King Gerald. Tables were forever safe from me. "Take small stitches, Eleanor, and don't yank the thread. It's not a rein and you're not a coachman," sewing mistress said later in the afternoon. I stabbed myself with the needle, but my stitches shrank. It was the same every day. I dreaded new orders. The curse didn't make me change easily. I had to concentrate every second. In my mind, I repeated my commands in an endless refrain. When I awoke, I instructed myself not to bounce out of bed. Leave the nightdress for the servants to put away. At breakfast, don't blow on my porridge. Don't spit out the lumps. On our afternoon walk, don't skip. Don't leap about. Once I actually spoke aloud. It was at dinner. Don't slurp, I instructed myself. I said it softly, but a pupil seated near me heard, and she told the others. The only subjects that came easily were those taught by writing mistress, composition and ciphering. She also taught penmanship, which was the one subject in which I did not attain excellence, mostly because writing mistress issued no orders. She taught Eorthian, but no other languages. When I told her I knew a little of the exotic tongues and wished to learn more, she gave me a dictionary of exotic speech. It became my second favorite book, after Mandy's Present. Whenever I had time, I practiced the languages, especially Ogreese. The meanings were dreadful, but there was an attraction in speaking the words. They were smooth, sleek, and slithery, the way a talking snake would sound. There were words like ps, sabus, delicious. If you could see this, I don't know if I described it before, but the way that it's written, there are, it's all in italics when it's Ogreese, and there are a lot of S's, obviously, but some of them are lowercase and some of them are uppercase. And so I'm sort of emphasizing the ones that are uppercase. And there's also frequently there are other double letters that are uppercased. So that's what's happening with me when I'm trying to say these words. I'd like to see you do better. Anyway, psabus means delicious. Sing means ear. Hijin, dinner. Efuth, taste. And fnu, sour. My progress in all of my subjects astounded the mistresses. In my first month, I did little right. In my second, I did little wrong. And gradually, it all became natural. Light steps, small stitches, quiet voice, ramrod straight back, deep curtsies without creaking knees, no yawns, soup tilted away from me, and no slurping. But in bed, before I fell asleep, I'd imagine what I would do if I were free of Lucinda's curse. At dinner, I'd paint lines of gravy on my face and hurl meat pasties at manners mistress. I'd pile headmistress's best china on my head and walk with a wobble and a swagger till every piece was smashed. Then I'd collect the smashed pottery and the smashed meat pasties and grind them into all my perfect stitchery. That's the end of chapter 10. Here comes chapter 11. Except for AREIDA, I had little pleasure from the society at finishing school. Only Hattie's set pretended to be friendly, and they treated me with the same oily condescension Hattie visited on me in public. They were an odious group, Hattie and the two she called her special friends, Blossom and Delicia. Blossom was the niece and sole heir to an unmarried earl. Her conversation was mostly worries that the earl would marry and have a child who would replace her as his heir. Delicia, the daughter of a duke, spoke rarely. When she did, it was to complain. The room was too drafty, the meal was ill-prepared, a housemaid had acted above her station, one of the other pupils wore rouge. The mistresses came to dislike me too. At first, while I was struggling to satisfy them and begin to succeed, they made a pet of me, which I hated. But when finished behavior came my second nature, they learned I was nobody's pet. I spoke as infrequently as I could and met their eyes only when I had to, and I returned to my old game. Sing more softly, Ella. They can hear you in Eortha. I became inaudible. Not so soft. The rest of us would like to hear your sweet tones. I sang too loud again, and although not so much as before, music mistress had to spend a quarter hour inching me along to the desired volume. Lift your feet, young ladies. This is a spirited gavotte. My legs shot up above my waist. And so on. It was a tiresome game, but I had to play it or feel a complete puppet. Hattie didn't tell anyone about my obedience. When she had an order for me, she'd tell me to meet her in the garden after supper when no one else was near. On the first such occasion, she instructed me to pick a bouquet for her. Luckily, she didn't know I was a goddaughter to a fairy cook. I picked the most fragrant blossoms, then ran to the herb garden hoping to find something useful. Ethelwort was my preference. If I found it, Hattie would have an itchy rash on her face for a week. Most of the herbs were the ordinary sort, but as I turned to leave, I spotted a sprig of bogweed. Taking care not to breathe its scent, I plucked it and placed it next to a rose. Hattie was delighted with the flowers and buried her face in them. They're sublime, but what? As the scent of the bogweed worked on her, her smile faded and her expression became vacant. What would make you stop giving me orders? She answered in a flat voice. If you stopped obeying them. Of course, I had wasted a question and I had no idea how long the bogweed scent would last. But as long as it lasted, I could ask her anything and she would answer honestly. What else would stop you? I asked quickly. Nothing, she thought. My death. No likely release from that quarter. What orders do you plan to give me? I don't plan. Why do you hate me? You never admired me. Do you admire me? Yes. Why? You're pretty and brave. She envied me. I was amazed. What do you fear? I asked. Ogres, bandits, drowning, becoming ill, climbing mountains, mice, dogs, cats, birds, horses, spiders, worms, tunnels. What? I stopped her. She was afraid of everything. What do you want most in the world? To be queen. A rabbit queen. Only I would obey her. Her face was changing, resuming its usual expression of gleeful malice. I tried one more question. What are your secrets? She didn't answer, just tugged cruelly on a handful of my hair. Her eyes lost their dull cast. Why am I standing here? Well, hold on. What was her voice? Why am I standing here? She looked down at her flowers, but didn't sniff them again. Oh, yes. What a good lady in waiting to bring me such a beautiful bouquet. She frowned. But one scent is not sweet. Take it out. I removed the bogweed and ground it under my foot. If I had thought of it, I could have asked her how she could be defeated. Who in the world knows how they could be defeated? I don't know how I could be defeated. Do you know how you could be defeated? I think, honestly, that would be a terrible question. What are your secrets was not a bad question. Anyway, Hattie's orders were chiefly chores. I think she lacked the imagination to devise more interesting commands. I brushed her clothes, cleaned her boots, rubbed her neck where it ached. Several times I had to sneak into the pantry and steal cookies. On one occasion, I had to clip her toenails. Do you rub brine into your feet? I asked, trying not to choke. I took revenge whenever I could. Spiders and mice from Madame Edith's cellar found their way into Hattie's bed. I'd stay awake at night and wait for the satisfying shriek. And so it went. Hattie issued commands and I retaliated, but there was no balance. Hattie was always ahead. She had the power. She held the whip. AREIDA was my only comfort. We ate our meals side by side. We sewed together. In our dancing lessons, we were partners. I told her about Frel and Mandy and Char. She told me about her parents, who kept an inn. They weren't wealthy, although another reason she was unpopular. When she left school, she would use her accomplishments to help them. She was kinder than anyone I'd ever known. When Julia, the tall wench, ate too many grapes from Madame Edith's arbor and was sick all night, AREIDA nursed her, although Julia's friends slept soundly. I helped, but only for AREIDA's sake. My nature was not so forgiving. In the garden one evening, I found myself telling AREIDA about Mother. Again, just like so admiring of AREIDA. I'm just saying. Before she died, we used to climb trees like this one. I rested a hand on the trunk of a low-branching oak. We'd go way up and sit as quiet as could be. Then we'd toss twigs or acorns at anyone who passed beneath. What happened to her? She asked. Don't tell me if you don't want to. I didn't mind. When I finished telling her, she sang an Aorthan morning song. I'm just going to read it. I wouldn't even guess at the tune. Hard farewell with no greeting to come. Sad farewell when love is torn away. Long farewell till death dies. But the lost one is with you. Her tenderness strengthens you. Her gaiety uplifts you. Her honor purifies you. More than memory, the lost one is found. I just teared up again. The fuck? AREIDA's voice was as smooth as syrup and as rich as gnome's gold. I cried, steady tears like rain. And like rain, they brought ease. That's the second time in a row that I've been like, oh, I teared up. And then like the next paragraph says that Ella cried. Like, am I remembering that these things make Ella cry? And that's what's making me tear up? Anyway, you have a beautiful voice, I said when I could speak. We Aorthans are all singers, but singing mistress says my voice is too husky. Hers is thin as a string, and yours is perfect. Romantic. A bell rang in the house, calling us in to prepare for bed. Is my nose red from crying? I asked. Oh my God. Okay. This is the scene that like, it could end in a kiss and it would make perfect sense. Okay. Just like, listen. Is my nose red from crying? I asked. A little. I don't want the others to see. I'll stay out a while longer. Manners mistress will be angry. I shrugged. She'll only tell me I've disgraced the king. I'll stay with you. I can watch your nose and tell you when it's not red anymore. Pay attention. Don't let your eyes wander. I wrinkled the feature. AREIDA giggled. I won't. Manners mistress will ask what we're doing out here. I was laughing too. I'll tell her I'm watching your nose. And I'll tell her I'm wrinkling it. She'll want to know what the king would think of our behavior. I'll tell her the queen watches every night while he wrinkles his nose 7 times. Those 2 people are married. Those 2 people are ostensibly in love with each other is all I'm saying. The bell rang again. Your nose isn't red now, AREIDA said. We ran for the house and met Manners mistress at the door on her way to search for us. The sight of her set us off again. Young ladies, go to your room. What would the king say? In the hall, still giggling, we met Hattie. Having a nice time? We were, I answered. I won't keep you then, but tomorrow, Ella, you must spend some time in the garden with me. You shouldn't associate with the lower orders like that wench from Aortha, she said the next evening. AREIDA is a higher order than you are, and I choose my own friends. My dear, I hate to cause you grief, but you must end your friendship with her. That's the end of chapter 11. You guys, I mean, are you picking up what I'm putting down here? Let me know if you feel like this could be written realistically to be young love. Let me know. Okay, chapter 12. This is the last one I'm going to read today. Hattie returned to the house, but I stayed outside. I watched her leave, hating her way of walking, a mince combined with a waddle. She stopped to pick a flower and lift it to her nose, posturing for me. I sat on a bench and stared down at the pebbled wall. In all the times I'd imagined the miseries she could inflict on me, I'd never imagined this. I'd thought of injuries and I'd imagined terrible embarrassment, but I'd never thought of this kind of hurt. AREIDA was in our room now, waiting to give me a lesson in Aorthan. I remained seated. I couldn't face her. Was there a way to stop being her friend without hurting her? I could pretend I had suddenly become mute, so I wouldn't be able to talk to her. But in that circumstance, she'd be my friend as much as ever. She'd talk to me, and we'd invent sign language, which would be great fun. And that wouldn't be ending our friendship, so the curse wouldn't let me do it. Besides, a mistress would be sure to say, "Speak, Ella," and I would have to. I could announce that I'd taken a vow of loneliness, but AREIDA would be hurt that I'd taken such a vow. If only Mother hadn't forbidden me to tell about the curse. But then again, explaining would be an act of friendship, which the curse also wouldn't allow. Excuse me. The bell rang, calling us to bed. I was late again, but tonight there was no AREIDA to joke with about our tardiness. In our room, she sat on my bed, completing a letter for writing mistress. Where were you? I've been reviewing the imperative. I'm tired, I said, not answering the question. Perhaps I did look tired or troubled because she didn't press me. She only patted my arm and said, "We can study imperatives tomorrow." In bed, I didn't want to sleep. I wanted to savor the last few hours before I had to hurt her. Sleep on, AREIDA. Be my friend for one more night. A long vigil lay ahead. I pulled out my magic book. It opened to a letter from Dame Olga to her daughters. My sweet darlings, your poor mother is desolate without you. I attended a cotillion last night at the palace. I wore my wine-colored taffeta gown and my ruby pendant. But it was for naught. The company was thin because King Gerald is away, although Prince Charmant was there. That charming man Sir Peter wasn't there either. I was desolate. I understand he's off traveling and becoming richer, I imagine. I wish him well and will be first to pay my respects on his return. 3 pages followed describing Dame Olga's social calendar and her wardrobe. In closing, she remembered she had daughters and was writing to them. I hope both of you are eating well to keep up your strength. Olive, pray remember not to eat Madame Edith's flowers. If you were to sicken or die, I should be desolate. Hattie, I hope you have found a trustworthy servant to dress your hair. Madame E. promised it could be arranged. I expect the 2 of you are amazingly finished by now. But do not toil too hard, my dears. If you can sing and dance charmingly, eat daintily, and sew a little, you will be fine ladies, and I shall be proud of you. My sweets, the carriage has arrived. I'm in my lemon silk calling gown, and I must fly. Your adoring mother, Dame Olga. Kind of lost the voice there for a second. Why was a trustworthy servant necessary to dress Hattie's hair? I compared the luxuriant tresses of Hattie and her mother with Olive's thin curls, and I remembered Hattie's attack on my hair after she smelled the bogweed. I laughed out loud. Hattie and Dame Olga wore wigs. Thank you, Dame Olga. I hadn't expected to laugh tonight. I turned the page. On the verso was an illustration of a centaur cult. Apple, I was sure, nuzzling a young man, Char. The cult was beautiful. His hide was deep brown with a tan mane and an irregular tan star on his chest. Skinny and leggy, he was made for speed, although he was too young to bear a rider. Would he ever really be mine? On the right was a letter from Char to his father. Dear father, I hope this finds you safe and well. My mother and my sister and brothers are in good health, as am I. Since I received instruction to join you, I have been filled with gratitude for your confidence in me. The knights you have chosen to follow me are stout fellows and bear the command of a stripling with good humor. I don't know what that means. My mother worries, but I tell her they will not let harm befall me. In truth, father, I am so stirred up by the thought of my first military duty, even if it is only reviewing border troops, that I hardly hear my good mother. Who knows? Perhaps the ogres will raid and there will be a skirmish. I do not fear injury, only that I may not acquit myself well. Skirmishes with ogres? How could there not be danger? Char continued to describe the visit of a trade delegation and the same ball that Dame Olga had attended, although he didn't mention what he had worn. Near the bottom of the page, my name appeared. I am training a centaur cult for a lass I know. Her mother was the late Lady Eleanor. I admire the daughter Ella, but she has gone to finishing school where I fear she will be made less admirable. What do they teach in such places? Sewing and curtsying? It's a great distance to go to learn such paltry tricks. Would he stop liking me now that I was no longer clumsy? I had never enjoyed being a small elephant and hadn't mourned the loss till now. Would he even be alive to stop liking me, or would he be an ogre's lunch? The next page was a letter from father to his bailiff. And I'm not saying that she couldn't also fall in love with Char. She could just be like a bisexual queen. That would be so cool. A bisexual literal queen. Father to his bailiff. Dear James, the post coach comes rarely to the elephants. Oh my god. Can't say elephants when I need to. No, okay. The post coach comes rarely to the Elves Forest, but it came today. I am still with the Greenies. The trading has been disappointing. They have not so much as shown me an agulin, no matter what I bring out to tempt them. Their chief trader, Slannon, knows little about bargaining. He gave me 3 vases in exchange for a gnomish copper stew pot, and the same for a simple wooden flute. Below were 3 pages of trades and sales. He closed with his intentions. I am making for Uaxi's farm. You may remember Uaxi, the giantess who entrusted her turnip harvest to me last year. On October 15th, she'll marry off her daughter and I shall be there. I should like to see a giant's wedding. The ritual is said to be peculiar. Moreover, several fairies are likely to be present. They say hardly a wedding or birth takes place without at least one in attendance. If I can persuade a few to reveal themselves, I may be able to pick up some fairy-made trifles. I swallowed. My mouth had gone dry. Mandy had never told me that fairies liked to go to weddings and births, but she and Lucinda had both been present when I was born. Perhaps Lucinda would go to the Giants. It was the first time I'd ever known a definite place where she might be, where I might be too if I could get there. She might even be in a generous frame of mind, especially if she had just cast a well-meant horrible spell. Perhaps she'd be so pleased that she'd release me from mine if I begged her to. I hadn't promised Father that I would stay at finishing school, only that I would go. I could leave whenever I wanted. And by leaving, I'd never have to take another order from Hattie. AREIDA would still think I was her friend. And if I succeeded with Lucinda, I still could be. Oh yeah, and it's like her whole motivating force for leaving is trying to preserve this friendship, this relationship with AREIDA, right? Like, I'm just saying. How late was it? How much of the night was left for travel? I stood up, then sat down again. How far was Uaxi's farm? The wedding was less than 2 weeks off. Could I get there in time? Frantically, I rifled the pages of my book, hoping to be vouchsafed a map. There, but it was the same one I'd looked at in the carriage on the way to finishing school. A frell, and no use to me now. No matter, I'd get directions somehow. In 5 minutes, my carpet bag was packed with a few essentials. Tonic, my magic book, my dictionary, a shawl, and little else. After a long look at AREIDA's sleeping form, I left. A long, longing look? I paused before the door to the daisy room, then went in. With quiet steps, I approached Hattie's bed. She frowned in her sleep and mumbled. I only understood one word, royal. Her wig was askew. Neat-fingered as I had become, I was able to lift it off her without waking her. Now what to do with it? If I threw it into the dying fire, the smell might wake someone. I could drape it over the head of the china cat that adorned the mantelpiece, but if Hattie woke early, she could rescue it before anyone saw. So I took it with me, a trophy. So that's it. chapters 10 through 12 of Ella Enchanted as a little treat. And there you go. Just like that. Last time they arrived at the finishing school, end of this session, she's leaving. So big stuff happening for Ella. Yeah, if there's anyone listening to this who agrees that the AREIDA relationship could be romantic, please let me know, because every time I read it, I become more convinced. Okay, so like I said, we'll be back with a new episode of WayTooBroad on March 20th. We'll be away next weekend, but we will talk to you on our return. So look forward to that. And thanks for listening if you did. And the podcast candle, which I did light, is now extinguished. Bye-bye.